Next, I want to talk about principal-agent problems and industry structure. Principal-agent problem is the problem you have when you delegate. So you ask someone else to do something for you, and if you've ever asked someone to do something for you, sometimes they do it the way you want to, and sometimes they don't. And that's the principal-agent problem, how to get them to do what you want them to do. So in the mortgage industry, we can think of a very long chain of delegation. We can say that we start with taxpayers, at least they have some interest, apparently, in just because we have government involved in housing finance. And they delegate to regulators who may or may not have the interests of taxpayers in mind, or may or may not execute that well. And then let's go from regulators to the government-sponsored enterprises of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. They in turn have employees, but they also delegate some of their responsibility to others. There are people who sell mortgages, sellers of mortgages, and there are servicers, people who service mortgages. Those are the people who collect payments. Remember that function. And then the sellers of mortgages, in turn, might the people who sell them to Freddie Mac, the mortgage bankers who sell them, might delegate some function to brokers. They delegate some functions to credit scoring companies, to credit repositories, appraisers. And there's just a whole bunch of delegation going on. And at each stage there may be cases where the delegation doesn't work well. It's possible that the agent, who's the person who's had stuff delegated to, does not do what the principal wants. That's the person who does the delegating. So that's generic, and I just want to talk about some of the issues as they apply to industry structure in the mortgage industry. There are a lot of examples, but if we go back to the days of the savings and loan process, with the savings and loan and the so-called originate to hold model, where the savings and loan originated the loan and then held it, then there's really no delegation of servicing or underwriting to an outside party. That is, you're not delegating those things to an outside party. And so the principal-agent problem is simply a matter of managing your employees. So you have employees, and you have to worry about whether they're doing their job the way you want them to. But once you manage that, you've managed the process. When you have securitization, then we are talking about outside parties getting involved. If, let's say it's Freddie Mac doing the securitizing, then someone else is going to originate and underwrite loans. So that's going to be done by an agent, and it's going to create principal-agent problems. Somebody else is going to service the loans, and again, that's an agent, and that can create principal-agent problems. When you have, but at least with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, you have one principal in some sense worrying about the servicing of the loans. When you have private securitization, you have many owners of the security, and so you have many investors for whom the servicer is an agent. And these investors will differ in how they want the loan serviced. If some of them might benefit from having the servicer forgive a bad loan, others would benefit if the servicer would foreclose as quickly as possible. And so with these conflicts of interest, you really get very complicated principal agent problems. Another point I'd like to make on principal agent problems is that credit scoring really changed the nature of the problem. Because before, when you had a human underwriter, the human underwriter was an agent. So you had, let's say, Freddie Mac buying loans, or a private label securitizer, private label issuer buying loans, and they would have been dependent on a human underwriter as an agent. That is, an underwriter working at another firm. That represents a challenge, especially for the private label issuer. There really wasn't much use of private label issuing as long as they were dependent on human underwriters, because there are principal agent problems. You have to send careful instructions to the underwriters. You have to do quality control on the underwriting and so on. If you can bypass the human underwriter with credit scoring, then you have a different agent. You have a credit scoring company making use of the credit repository. Of course, the human underwriter will also make use of the credit repository. And you're bypassing the human underwriter. You're dealing with a more automated system, and so some of the principal agent problems go away. And that's why private label issued securities took off once credit scoring took over the industry. It became less expensive to manage the principal agent problem involving underwriting loans once credit scoring took off. And I think we may see a similar ability as the automated appraisals, sorts of things that you find on Zillow and so on. Automated appraisals can resolve some of the principal agent problems that otherwise would arise with human appraisers. Because with a human appraiser, the human appraiser has to respond to the mortgage seller, whose interest is in, give us the appraisal that will enable us to close the loan, and the mortgage buyer, or whoever's going to be taking on the risk of the loan, who says, don't inflate the value of the house. So the mortgage seller says, do inflate the value of the house. The mortgage buyer says, don't. The human appraiser isn't going to get work if mortgage sellers don't hire them. And if the human appraiser works too much against the interest of the mortgage buyer and lets too many bad appraisals slip by, then at some point the mortgage buyer is going to have to do something to not allow that human appraiser to work for him anymore. But this whole issue can be bypassed to some extent if you have automated appraisals that work, just as credit scoring allows you to change the role of the human underwriter. So the point here is that the nature of the principal agent problem can change as the technology of mortgage origination changes.